In the winter of 1971, Philip Zimbardo, a Stanford psychologist, watched in horror as his famous prison experiment collapsed into chaos. What was designed to last 2 weeks had to be terminated after just 6 days. College students, normal, psychologically screened, middle-class young men, had transformed into sadistic guards and traumatized prisoners. But here's what most people miss about Zimbardo's discovery. It wasn't that all humans are secretly monsters waiting to emerge. It was that character reveals itself only under specific conditions. Conditions most people never create when evaluating someone's true nature. Years later, Zimbardo would reflect, "I thought I knew these students. Their applications were pristine, their interviews were impressive, but I didn't know them at all because I had never seen them in the only 2 situations that actually matter." That revelation would transform not just psychology, but our entire understanding of how to read human character. Because most of us spend our lives judging people based on carefully managed performances, never glimpsing the truth that hides beneath the surface, until it's too late. Zimbardo's experiment revealed a devastating truth. The markers we typically use to assess character, charm, credentials, articulate speech, professional success, are almost worthless. They measure performance, not essence, the mask, not the face. And in that gap between appearance and reality, betrayals bloom, trust shatters, and we find ourselves asking the question that haunts every broken relationship, failed partnership, and devastating friendship. How did I not see this coming? But here's what Zimbardo discovered in the wreckage of his experiment, and what subsequent decades of psychological research have confirmed. There are exactly 2 situations that strip away the performance and reveal authentic character. 2 moments when the mask falls. 2 tests that predict with stunning accuracy who someone really is. And once you learn to recognize these moments, you'll never be fooled again. If you've ever been blindsided by someone's betrayal, a partner who seemed devoted until they weren't, a friend who appeared loyal until convenience demanded otherwise, a colleague who smiled to your face and sabotaged behind your back, you know the sickening realization that you never really knew them at all. Or perhaps you've had the opposite experience. Someone who seemed rough, blunt, or unimpressive revealed depths of integrity that stunned you. In both cases, you were reading the wrong signals. You were judging the performance, not the person. And here's the uncomfortable truth. We're all doing this, constantly, because we've been trained to evaluate character based on the very things that matter least. Modern neuroscience confirmed what Zimbardo intuited. The brain's assessment systems, primarily the dorsomedial prefrontal cortex, are terrible at predicting character from typical social interactions. Dr. Alexander Todorov at Princeton demonstrated that we form character judgments in milliseconds based on facial features and initial behavior. And these thin slice assessments are catastrophically unreliable. We think we're reading character when we're actually reading rehearsed social performance. But there are 2 situations, 2 psychological crucibles where performance becomes impossible, where the mask can't be maintained, where authentic character is forced into the light. Learn to identify these situations, and you gain what researchers call predictive character assessment, the ability to see who someone truly is before they reveal it in ways that hurt you. The stakes couldn't be higher. In an age of performance, image management, and carefully curated personas, the ability to see through the surface has become the rarest and most valuable skill you can develop. This isn't about cynicism or paranoia. It's about discernment. It's about protecting yourself from those who would exploit your trust, while opening yourself fully to those who deserve it. And perhaps most importantly, it's about becoming the kind of person who passes these 2 tests yourself. Because character isn't something you have, it's something you demonstrate when it costs you. Principle 1. The Invisible Observer Test. How they act when no one is watching. Most people perform character. They demonstrate kindness when it might be noticed, exhibit integrity when there's potential reward, show compassion when witnesses are present. But character that exists only under observation isn't character, it's calculation. True character is what remains when all eyes turn away, what emerges when reward, recognition, and reputation are impossible. This is what psychologists call private moral behavior, and it's the single most reliable predictor of authentic character ever identified. Dr. Taya Cohen at Carnegie Mellon conducted a meta-analysis of 127 studies on moral behavior and discovered a stunning pattern. People's behavior when observed and their behavior when unobserved often had near zero correlation. In other words, public virtue and private integrity are almost completely independent traits. You cannot predict one from the other. The charming colleague who champions ethics in meetings might cut every corner when alone. The reserved person who rarely speaks about values might be scrupulously honest in every private decision. This gap between public performance and private behavior is what Cohen calls the integrity differential, and it reveals everything. Consider the famous lost wallet studies conducted across 355 cities in 40 countries by behavioral economists at the University of Zurich. Over 17,000 wallets containing money, identification, and contact information were lost in public places. Researchers then tracked return rates. The results shattered conventional assumptions. Wallets with more money were more likely to be returned, not less. Why? Because the people who would return a wallet with $13 weren't motivated by avoiding guilt from a small theft. They were motivated by internalized values that operated regardless of amount. They returned wallets because keeping it would be wrong, regardless of whether anyone would ever know. This is private moral behavior, character that exists independent of observation. Now contrast this with the counter-evidence. In cities where researchers added observer pressure, subtle cues that behavior might be monitored, return rates barely changed among high-integrity individuals but skyrocketed among low-integrity ones. Those without internalized values needed the threat of being caught. Those with character didn't need the threat because their actions weren't contingent on detection. This distinction is everything. Here's the practical application. Whenever you want to assess someone's true character, create or observe situations where no benefit or recognition is possible. Watch what they do with shopping carts. Do they return them to the corral or leave them loose? Notice how they treat public spaces they're about to exit. Pay attention to whether they pick up litter even when no one's around to see it. These micro-behaviors are windows into private moral behavior. As Zimbardo later reflected, small anonymous choices predict large consequential ones. The person who won't return a cart won't return your trust when convenient to betray it. Try this experiment. Before entering into any significant relationship, romantic, business, or friendship, create opportunities to observe the person when they don't know you're watching. Not through deception or surveillance, but through natural situations where your presence isn't felt. How do they treat service workers when you're not there? What choices do they make in professional settings when no one important is observing? These moments reveal the truth that polished performances hide. But here's the warning. If you use this knowledge to manipulate or entrap people, you've revealed your own character deficit. The goal isn't to catch people failing. It's to identify those who consistently pass so you can trust them with what matters. And equally important, ask yourself, what does my behavior look like when no one is watching? Because you can't recognize authentic character in others if you haven't cultivated it in yourself. Yet private behavior is only half the equation. The second test goes even deeper, revealing not just integrity, but something more profound: the capacity for genuine compassion. Principle 2. The powerless person test. How they treat those who can't benefit them. If the invisible observer test reveals integrity, the powerless person test reveals humanity. This is the ancient wisdom that modern psychology has finally quantified. Character is most accurately measured not by how someone treats equals or superiors, but by how they treat those who hold no power, offer no advantage, and can't retaliate. This is what Dr. Brené Brown calls asymmetric kindness. decency that flows downward in the power hierarchy, where it costs something but gains nothing. The neuroscience here is devastating. Dr. Lasana Harris at University College London used fMRI to study brain activity when people viewed images of homeless individuals versus professionals. In a disturbing percentage of subjects, the medial prefrontal cortex, the region associated with recognizing other humans as human, showed reduced activation when viewing powerless people. Their brains were literally dehumanizing those who couldn't reciprocate. But in subjects with high scores on empathy and character measures, this region activated equally for everyone. Their humanity wasn't contingent on social utility. This neural pattern predicts real-world behavior with stunning accuracy. The classic research comes from Dr. Robert Sutton at Stanford, who studied workplace hierarchies. He discovered what he called the asshole hierarchy test, whether someone's kindness is conditional on rank. Are they charming to superiors, neutral with equals, and dismissive to subordinates? Or do they maintain consistent decency regardless of power dynamics? Sutton tracked these patterns across thousands of professionals and found that selective kindness, kindness only toward those who can help you, predicts not just workplace toxicity but personal relationship failure. Because power dynamics are fluid, the person who can't help you today might be able to tomorrow. And the person who treats you well only while you're useful will abandon you the moment you're not. Consider Maria, a CEO candidate being evaluated for a Fortune 500 company. Her interviews were flawless, articulate, strategic, impressively credentialed. The board was ready to hire her. But one board member insisted on an unusual evaluation. He posed as a janitor and engaged her in conversation while she waited for her final interview. Maria, not recognizing him, was dismissive, barely making eye contact. When the board member revealed his identity in the boardroom, the offer was withdrawn. If she treats someone she perceives as a janitor with contempt, he explained, she'll treat everyone with contempt the moment they can't advance her goals. 6 months later, Maria's former company imploded amid scandals of employee abuse and toxic leadership. The janitor test had predicted everything. Now consider the opposite. Dr. Sarah Conrath's research on costly helping behavior at Indiana University. She studied people who went out of their way to help others when it was inconvenient and offered no benefit. Parents who stopped to assist strangers crying children. Professionals who spent time mentoring people outside their networks. Individuals who advocated for powerless groups despite social cost. Conrath found that these asymmetric helpers were significantly more likely to maintain long-term relationships, report higher life satisfaction, and be rated as highly trustworthy by everyone who knew them. Their character was validated not by what they said, but by what they did when nothing was gained. The practical application here is profound. Observe how potential partners, colleagues, or friends treat people who are invisible in social hierarchies. Waitstaff, customer service workers, janitors, children, the elderly, people who are perceived as beneath notice. Do they maintain eye contact? Do they use respectful language? Do they express genuine appreciation? Or do they treat these interactions as barely worth completing obligations? This behavior is the most honest predictor of character you'll ever encounter because it measures empathy that isn't strategic, kindness that isn't transactional. Here's the test you can run. Watch someone in situations involving people who have no power over them. Retail workers, service staff, subordinates, or anyone in a lower status position. Do they adjust their tone, warmth, or patience based on perceived status? The smaller the adjustment, the higher the character. The person who treats a CEO and a custodian with equal respect is revealing something rare and precious. They've internalized the fundamental equality of human dignity. They don't see people as tools for advancement, but as humans worthy of respect regardless of utility. But be warned, this test will reveal things about yourself you might not want to see. Notice your own behavior when someone can't benefit you. Notice the impatience that flares, the curtness that emerges. That's data. Use it not to shame yourself, but to grow. Because the ultimate goal isn't just identifying character in others, it's cultivating it in yourself. Yet these two tests alone are not enough. Understanding how they work together and how they can be counterfeited requires deeper insight. Principle 3, the integration principle, why both tests together create immunity to deception. Here's what makes these two tests revolutionary. They're nearly impossible to fake simultaneously over time. Someone can perform private integrity if they know they're being observed in private moments. That's just sophisticated impression management. Someone can perform asymmetric kindness if they believe it might be noticed or reported. That's strategic reputation building. But maintaining both consistently across varied contexts when neither reward nor recognition is possible, that requires actual character. This is what researchers call behavioral consistency under variance, the holy grail of character assessment. Dr. Dan Ariely at Duke demonstrated this through elegant experiments on honesty. He created situations where people could cheat for money when unobserved, invisible observer test, and situations where people could exploit powerless Confederates for gain, powerless person test. Only 3% of subjects maintained integrity in both situations when repeated over time. But that 3%, when tracked longitudinally, never showed character failures in any context. They were consistently trustworthy because their values were internalized, not performed. The reason both tests are required is that they measure different dimensions of character. Private moral behavior measures integrity. Do you do what's right regardless of observation? Asymmetric kindness measures humanity. Do you value others regardless of utility? You can have one without the other. The honest person who lacks empathy, the kind person who lacks principles. But when both are present, integrity plus humanity, you've found rare psychological gold. Someone who will neither betray your trust nor instrumentalize your value. Someone who sees you as worthy of respect simply because you exist, and who will keep their commitments even when you'd never know they broke them. This is why the combination is so powerful in relationships. Your romantic partner might be privately honest but cruel to service workers. That's a red flag suggesting conditional respect. Your business partner might be kind to everyone but cut corners when unobserved. That's a red flag suggesting performative ethics. But when someone consistently demonstrates both, private integrity and status-blind decency, you've found a person you can trust with your life, your heart, or your business. Because their character isn't contingent on circumstances. The practical integration protocol works like this. Before committing to any significant relationship, observe the person across at least 10 instances involving both tests. How many times do they pass both? Character isn't revealed in one moment of pressure, but in pattern consistency over time. Create a simple tracking system. Each time you observe private behavior or powerless person interaction, note whether it reflects high character or reveals gaps. If someone consistently passes both, trust them. If they consistently fail both, distance yourself. If they pass one but not the other, understand you're dealing with partial character, reliable in some contexts but not all. But the most important integration isn't observing others, it's cultivating both in yourself. Because if you haven't developed private integrity and asymmetric kindness, you won't recognize them in others. You'll be attracted to surface charm and repelled by awkward authenticity. The world you perceive is filtered through the character you've developed. Principle 4. The counterfeit patterns, how manipulators fake character, and how to spot the fraud. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Sophisticated manipulators know these tests exist. They've learned to perform private virtue when they suspect observation and demonstrate strategic kindness to powerless people who might talk. Dr. Robert Hare, the psychologist who developed the psychopathy checklist, discovered that high-functioning psychopaths often excel at short-term character performance. They've studied what impresses people and can maintain the act long enough to gain trust. So how do you distinguish authentic character from skilled counterfeit? The answer lies in what researchers call micro-inconsistencies under cognitive load. When someone is performing character, they need mental bandwidth to maintain the performance. Under stress, distraction, or emotional pressure, the mask slips. Authentic character, by contrast, becomes more visible under stress because it's not a performance, it's a default. This is why Zimbardo's experiment was so revealing. Pressure exposed true character because maintaining false character requires resources that vanish under duress. Watch for these counterfeit indicators. First, spotlight altruism, kindness that somehow always gets mentioned, photographed, or observed. Authentic, asymmetric kindness happens quietly. Performed kindness demands audience. Second, conditional privacy. Integrity in private situations that might be verified, but not in truly anonymous ones. Third, strategic niceness. Warmth that adjusts too precisely to perceived power dynamics, suggesting calculation rather than genuine respect. The definitive test? Observe behavior under 3 conditions: when tired, when stressed, and when they believe no benefit is possible. Fatigue reduces the capacity for performance. Stress reveals defaults, and the certainty of no benefit eliminates strategic motivation. If character remains consistent across all 3, it's authentic. If it degrades, you're seeing performance collapse. But here's the warning: don't become so suspicious that you miss authentic character when it appears. The goal isn't paranoia, it's discernment. Use these tests not to assume everyone is fake, but to identify those rare individuals who are real. They exist, and they're worth finding. Now you understand the science, the tests, and the counterfeits. But how do you systematically apply this knowledge in your life without becoming a cynical character detective? Welcome to the 90-Day Protocol, a structured approach to character assessment that transforms these insights into practical wisdom. Weeks 1 to 2, the observation phase. Begin by simply noticing. Don't judge, don't conclude, just observe. For every significant person in your life or entering your life, watch for instances of both tests: private behavior and treatment of powerless people. Keep a private journal. Each instance is data, not verdict. You're building a pattern map, not collecting evidence for prosecution. Note not just failures, but passes, moments when someone demonstrates high character. These positive data points matter as much as negative ones. Weeks 3 to 4, the pattern recognition phase. Review your observations. Do patterns emerge? Is someone consistently kind to powerless people but dishonest when unobserved? That's partial character. Are they privately honest but status-conscious in treatment of others? That's another form of partial character. Or do they consistently pass both tests? That's the gold standard. Remember, nobody is perfect. You're looking for dominant patterns, not flawless records. Weeks 5 to 8, the stress test phase. Now introduce complexity. Observe how people behave under cognitive load, when tired, stressed, rushed, or distracted. Does character remain consistent? If it degrades significantly, you're seeing performance collapse. If it remains stable or even strengthens, you're seeing authentic character. Also note, does this person extend the same character assessment to others? Do they judge people by surfaces or by these deeper tests? Like recognizes like. Weeks 9 to 12, the integration phase. Make decisions based on your data. Deepen relationships with those who consistently demonstrate both forms of character. Create respectful distance from those who consistently fail both. And most importantly, examine your own behavior through the same lens. Run the protocol on yourself. When you're exhausted, how do you treat people who can't benefit you? When no one is watching, what choices do you make? This self-examination is more important than any external assessment. The ethical framework. Use this knowledge with humility. You're not perfect, and neither is anyone else. The goal isn't to find flawless humans, they don't exist. It's to identify people whose character is strong enough to be trustworthy in contexts that matter, and to become that person yourself. Also remember, context and culture matter. Some apparent failures reflect exhaustion, neurodiversity, or cultural differences. Give grace, extend benefit of doubt, but don't ignore consistent patterns. The transformation promise. People who master this protocol report profound shifts. Toxic relationships end before they cause deep damage. Genuine friendships deepen because they're built on accurate assessment. Professional partnerships succeed because they're founded on mutual character rather than surface charm. And most importantly, their own character strengthens because daily self-examination reveals gaps they're motivated to fill. You become who you're looking for. Return with me to Zimbardo, standing in the ruins of his experiment, watching in horror as good people revealed hidden cruelty and normal students transformed into victims. He could have concluded that humans are simply monsters waiting to emerge. Instead, he discovered something more nuanced and more useful. Character is revealed, not created, by circumstance. The guards who became sadistic already contained that capacity. The experiment simply removed the constraints that normally kept it hidden. And the few guards who maintained decency? They had internalized values that operated regardless of social permission or pressure. They passed both tests. They did what was right when no one with authority was watching, and they treated prisoners as humans despite the power imbalance. Years later, Zimbardo would reflect. The most important lesson wasn't that people are good or evil. It's that character is both more fragile and more durable than we imagine. Most people's character is contingent. It depends on circumstance. But some people's character is intrinsic. It operates regardless of circumstance. And you can. Tell the difference if you know where to look. You now know where to look. You've learned the two tests that strip away performance and reveal essence. How people act when no one is watching, and how they treat those who can't benefit them. You understand why both tests together create near immunity to deception. You've learned to spot counterfeits, and you have a protocol for systematic assessment. But here's the final truth, the one that matters most. This knowledge is a mirror before it's a spotlight. Before you judge others by these tests, you must judge yourself. Because the only way to become truly skilled at recognizing character is to cultivate it in yourself. The person who lacks private integrity won't notice its absence in others. The person who treats powerless people dismissively won't recognize that red flag in potential partners. The world you perceive is shaped by who you've become. So the real question isn't, can I spot character in others? It's, would I pass my own tests? Tonight, when you're alone and no one is watching, will you do the right thing? Tomorrow, when you encounter someone who can offer you nothing, will you treat them with full dignity? These aren't hypothetical questions. They're the daily referendums on your soul. In our next exploration, we'll reveal the advanced patterns, how to cultivate unshakable character in yourself, even when you failed these tests in the past. Because character isn't fixed, it's forged. And the people who understand that are the ones who ultimately pass every test that matters. The mirror is waiting. What will it show?